Hello everyone, it's Keith Bailey back for part 2 of my NFL predictions for 2017. Today we're going to look at the NFC side of the football. I already went with told you my prediction for the AFC. I think the playoffs are going to be Patriots, Steelers, Titans, Raiders, Chiefs, Ravens. I have the Titans and Raiders getting out of the first round with a win. And then I have the Steelers and Patriots, respectively, beating both of those teams in the divisional round. And then I have the Patriots beating the Steelers. So it's every home team winning there. Not going to be as clear-cut in the NFC, though. Not even close. And we'll start with the NFC North. The most predictable thing that you can predict about the NFC North is the Bears will wind up in last place. I have Chicago going 5-11. They're not there. They have major question marks at quarterback. They have major question marks on defense. But John Fox is still a good coach, and he's going to squeeze every bit of talent out of this team that he can. It's just not going to be this year. Next up, we have the Minnesota Vikings in third place in the NFC. Gee, I know you're high on your Vikings, but they kind of finished their season winning 3 of their last 11 games. So I'm not as high on them as you are. I have them going 6-10. If Teddy Bridgewater returns miraculously mid-season or before the season begins, then I'd be prompted to put Minnesota a little higher. But Sam Bradford completing passes 4 yards past his center's head every single game, it's not going to win football games. The Vikings found that out real quick last year when they only won 3 of their last 11 games. When that defense got tired of carrying the load, because that defense is nasty, I'll give you that. It's one of the best defenses in the league. But the Texans had the best defense in the league back in 2014, and they went 2-14. So, Minnesota Vikings 6-10. I think is going to be the outcome of their season. Next up, Detroit Lions. I have them in second place in the NFC North. I have them missing the playoffs. I have them going 8-8. They had a very good year last year, but you're not going to come back and win 8 games every single year. I think they will lose a bunch of those games. Law of averages will catch up, and they'll end up going 8-8. First place in the NFC North goes to the Green Bay Packers. That's kind of predictable. I mean, Green Bay is a very solid football team. I know they have questions in their secondary, but as long as you have one of the best quarterbacks of this generation throwing the football, you're going to win more than 10 games in a year when he's healthy. Without Aaron Rodgers, the Packers are not a playoff team. But with that being said, he is healthy, and the Packers, I think, are going to be the 1 seed in the NFC playoffs this year with a 12-4 record. That's right. I don't think there's going to be a dominating NFC team. 12-4 is good enough to get the 1 seed, I think. Next up, we have the NFC South. This might surprise some people. In fourth place, I have the Carolina Panthers. In fourth place, I have the Panthers going 9-7. That's right. I think every single team in the NFC South ends this season with a winning record. This team is very good, but they're going to cannibalize each other because they have to play 6 games against one another. And other than those 6 games, these teams are going to be very, very good. 6, 8, 12... 12-12 is the record that those teams will all end up with in the division combined. That's 12 losses. And combined, I look at 25 losses combined. So, I think half of their losses will be to each other. That's how good I think these teams are. Panthers, 9-7, fourth place. Third place in the NFC South. The Buccaneers, also going 9-7. Missing the playoffs, unfortunately. the Tampa Bay Buccaneers really, really have upgraded their weapons on offense. But it's up to Jameis Winston to throw less interceptions because over the last 2 seasons, he's among the list of quarterbacks who have thrown the most interceptions in the NFL. And that was his fear coming out of college, and that fear has translated into the NFL now. But he has some nice toys to play with. You got to give him that. Second place in the NFC South, and your 5 seed in the NFL playoffs is the New Orleans Saints. That's right. I have the Saints making the playoffs because I don't think you can keep Drew Brees down for long. You held the New Orleans Saints to 3 consecutive 7-9 seasons. Great. That defense is going to catch up at some point. And when it does, that offense is going to be right there, still chugging along. And guess what? That Adrian Peterson signing may not be sexy. Well, yeah, it may not be, but people fail to realize that Adrian Peterson struggled in Week 1 last year against the Tennessee Titans, but the Titans ended up finishing that season as the 3rd best team against the run. Adrian Peterson struggled, then he was out for the rest of the year. That's what ended up happening. Adrian Peterson, especially with a year off, might be able to rekindle how good of a running back he was in 2014, 2015, 2013. Because Adrian Peterson can still be a premier back in this league. And guess what? Teams are now going to have to account for Drew Brees and Adrian Peterson. Because guess what, guys? Adrian Peterson has never, ever in his seasons as a Minnesota Viking had a quarterback as good as Drew Brees. And now that Drew Brees is back there and Adrian Peterson's lining up right behind him, you won't be able to stack 8 people in the box to stop Adrian Peterson anymore. Because that's all teams would end up doing when the Vikings never had a top-tier receiver. They had Adrian Peterson. Teams are putting 8 teams in the box to try to stop Adrian Peterson. They're not going to be able to do that, not with the Saints offense. And guess what that's going to do for Adrian Peterson and Mark Ingram? They're going to find more room to run the football. Because the Saints, I don't think Drew Brees is going to finish with 5,000 passing yards this season, because I think the Saints are going to be a little more balanced this year than they have been in previous years, and I think it's going to help. 10-6, 5 seed, New Orleans Saints. I really think the Saints are going to be a solid football team this year, and you can't keep an elite quarterback like Drew Brees out of the playoffs for very long, especially with losing records. I mean, last year, the Saints lost 3 games on special teams errors. 3 games. They could have gone 10-6 if they just cleaned up those small mistakes last year. And I think New Orleans, they'll be back in. They'll be in the playoffs this year as a 5 seed. Your winner of the NFC South, and your 3 seed is the Atlanta Falcons. I have them going 11-5. They're a very good football team. But they're also a football team that can lose the unpredictable game from time to time. That's what happened to them last year a lot. There were some questionable losses against teams like the Eagles, against teams like the Buccaneers in Week 1. They lost to the Seahawks. They're a good football team, but the Atlanta Falcons also lost to the Chiefs, surprisingly, and they lost to the Chargers. So some questionable losses are the reason Atlanta drops to 11-5 again. The Falcons are still a good football team. They're still going to make the playoffs. But it's not going to be as clear-cut in the NFC South as it was last year. I know Tampa Bay was giving the Atlanta Falcons a little bit of a run last year, but Atlanta eventually stretched it out after the Falcons were 6-5 and they won 5 straight games to end the year. But Atlanta goes 11-5 and I think are the 3 seed. NFC East. We have the 4th place team, the Washington Redskins, at 6-10. I don't know what to make of this team, because Kirk Cousins, every season it seems like he loses his top weapons on offense. I know they have Jordan Reed still. I know that they went out and they got Terrell Pryor, and they have there's a new receiver that they added. I forget his name, but the Redskins, Kirk Cousins is a good quarterback, but it's like a gut feeling. I'm not feeling it with them this year. I think they're gonna go 6-10, and your third place team in the NFC East, the Philadelphia Eagles. I think they go 7-9 again. They have the potential to be a very good team, but the problem is they play in a competitive division, and they ended up drawing the AFC West, probably one of the best, if not the best division in football. Every team in the NFC East has to play the AFC West, right? Yeah. And guess what? The NFC East is going to pay for that. And the AFC West is going to pay for it too. Both of those divisions are going to cannibalize each other a little bit. That's why I have the Raiders as a 10-6 team. That's why I have the Chiefs as a 10-6 team. That's why I have the 6-seeded Cowboys as a 10-6 team. I think the Cowboys go 10-6, second place in the NFC East. They'll still make the playoffs, but teams now have film on Dak. Ezekiel Elliott might be suspended. Half the Cowboys roster is probably suspended for something. The Cowboys are unorganized. They have so much talent on paper, but they can never keep their off-field issues to a bare minimum. They never can. They're always in the news for something. And I think the Giants, as the 4 seed, I think the Giants go 10-6. Same record as the Cowboys. Better division record, though. Because I think the Giants are a solid football team. They have a solid defense, and they have no more excuses on offense. Not with Brandon Marshall joining Dorial Green Beckham, joining Odell Beckham Jr. Not with that wide receiver duo. I know the Giants have dire need of a running game, but having another option on the other side of Odell Beckham Jr. is going to completely open up that run game, because it's no longer just Odell Beckham Jr. and then everyone else like it has been. The Giants, I think, are going to go 10-6 and win the NFC East. We now go to the NFC West. Also a kind of predictable division, especially when you're talking about your last place teams. The 49ers as the 4th place team, I think they go 5-11, but I think that they'll give teams some trouble. The 49ers aren't the slouches, or they're not going to be the slouches they were last year. They beat one team last year, and that was the Rams. They lost every other game. The 49ers, I think, are in last place at 5-11. Your 3rd place team in the NFC West, the Los Angeles Rams, also 5-11, but 3-3 in the division, 2-8 against everyone else. And they play very well in the NFC West. For some reason, except when it's against the 49ers, they'll steal one from the Cardinals, they'll steal one from the Seahawks. It's been known to happen. And I think that happens again this year. Your 2nd place team in the NFC West, and barely missing the playoffs, is the Seattle Seahawks. That's right. I had the Seattle Seahawks missing the playoffs this year, but they still go 10-6. That's just the way it ended up happening, because let me tell you, most of the time, 10-6 will get you a spot in the playoffs. But I think the Seattle Seahawks are going to be the unfortunate casualty of a very competitive NFC, because there's going to be 6 teams in the AFC with a winning record. There's going to be 9 teams in the NFC with a winning record, and 4 of those 9 teams reside in the NFC South. So I think the Seahawks, they'll miss the playoffs. They'll be 10-6. They're going to miss it. Which leads me to the 1st place team in the NFC West, the Arizona Cardinals. Listen, look at the Cardinals' schedule last year. Let's take a look, shall we? A lot of people are overlooking this team. A lot of people overlooking this team, and I don't understand why. 2016 schedule. Let's go through this, shall we? Seahawks. No. Okay. So, they barely lost to the Patriots. They lost to the Patriots on a game-winning field goal. They throttle the Buccaneers. They lose a weird one against the Bills. They barely lose to the Rams. I mean, let's see. They throttle the Buccaneers. They throttle the Niners. They throttle the Jets. They beat the Niners. They beat the Redskins. But look at their losses. And what the heck is this thing telling me? Come on. Let's just go to their actual schedule. It's giving me games from like last year and 2 years ago. All right. Cardinals in week 1. Barely lose to the Patriots. Let's just look at their losses. They lost to the Bills 33-18. That was a weird one. They barely lost to the Rams. They lost that game by 4. They tie the Seahawks. And then they lose to Carolina by 10. Then they barely lose to the Vikings. They get throttled by the Falcons. They barely lose to the Dolphins. They barely lose to the Saints. I mean, the talent is there. You look at some of these Cardinals games. I mean, look at some of the teams they beat last year. The Buccaneers did pretty well last year, and they beat them 40-7. The Seahawks did pretty well last year, and they didn't lose a game against the Seahawks last year. They tied them, and then they beat them. They beat them 34-31 in Seattle in Week 16. They destroyed the Rams in Week 17, and they lost to the Saints 48-41 in Week 15, and they barely lost to the Dolphins in overtime in Week 14. They beat the Redskins that had a winning record. They struggled against Atlanta. They struggled against the the Vikings. They barely lost to the Vikings. But I mean, this team, I don't think they're going to be kept down for long. This is a very, very good football team that can still score a lot of points, because if you look at this, they scored at least 34 points in their last 3 games of the year, and then they scored 23, 31, 19, 24, 23, 26. So earlier in the season they struggled, and then they started finding the rhythm at the end of the year. I just don't see the Cardinals staying down for long. Not with all that talent on that team. Not with Larry Fitzgerald. Especially not with David Johnson. Not with Carson Palmer. Not with that defense. 11-5, 2 seed. And now we go to the playoffs. Let's see here. In the playoffs, we have Dallas Cowboys traveling to take on the Atlanta Falcons. This is where the Falcons' reign ends, I think. I think the Dallas Cowboys go into Atlanta, and I think they beat the Atlanta Falcons. This is a game featuring the teams at the top 2 seeds last year. But Dallas, I think they start winning at the right time. I think the 6th-seeded Cowboys travel to the Georgia Dome and catch the Falcons off guard and win. And I think that happens as well with the Saints traveling to take on the Giants. Both teams finished 10-6. I think the New Orleans Saints have the firepower on offense to surprise that Giants defense a little bit. And I think the Saints, as the 5 seed, end up moving on to the divisional round. And now we go to the divisional round. We have the Saints traveling to take on the Cardinals. I think Arizona wins this. The Saints are going to keep it very close, and I think the Saints are going to be a field goal away from going to the NFC Championship game. But the Cardinals are just too good of a football team to let that happen. I know it's Carson Palmer in the playoffs, but the Saints defense still needs work. And with the amount of talent that the Cardinals have on offense, it'll be hard for even Carson Palmer to screw that up. Next, we have the Dallas Cowboys traveling to take on the Green Bay Packers in a game some of us might remember happened in 2014 with the whole Dez Bryant catch situation. I think the Cowboys avenged themselves here. That's right. I think the Dallas Cowboys, as the 6th seed, get all the way to the NFC Championship game. In your conference championship game, you have the Dallas Cowboys at the Arizona Cardinals. Cardinals put a stop to it. The defense of the Cardinals can contain the Cowboys. Dak Prescott won't be able to do what he does against the Cardinals defense. And the Cowboys defense isn't exactly a stellar group, so the Cardinals should still be able to score. And I think Arizona surprises some people, and I think the Cardinals end up going to the Super Bowl to play the New England Patriots. Comment below. Let me know who you think would win that game. The Patriots and the Cardinals in the Super Bowl. I picked the Patriots because I know it's predictable, but it's hard for me not to. That's what I think will happen this year. Please subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys all next time.